I am unashamed. What about you?
So we ended our teal season this past weekend. I would say overall it was a bust. But yeah.
Yeah, it's according to how you look at it. I mean, some people get wrapped up in the how many did we get, and that's the litmus test of why you do it.
So it says a man
with me,
journals.
It's just, as the old DU man said, enjoying the great outdoors.
No, I agree with you.
I agree.
Sun come up, and we see, but we don't fix it up for blue-winged teal for mainly one reason. You said, well, could you get more ducks on the premises? Well, of course we could.
Yeah.
But if we spend all the time and effort to get ready a big teal spot, we're using up a lot of very valuable grass and whatnot too early, September, too early for regular duck season. So we'd rather save it for the main duck season for one reason. The table as a table fare. As the blue-winged teal, even the Cajuns have to admit, it takes a lot of garlic. It takes a lot of garlic to knock that wing out.
I would say the blue-winged teal is at the bottom of the list in terms
He's
of
right above a shoveler.
Yeah. Right above a shoveler, right in there, pretty close, both of them.
And it's their diet, I assume. They come down earlier. I've always assumed that it's because there's not as much water. So
you take a bird that smells like a sewer pond.
That's right.
That's the smell.
That's the smell.
And I've tried a lot of different concoctions. Maybe some of the guys in South Louisiana could give us a.
Well, we found some guys, Jase and Jay have found some guys that take
Houston.
them and eat them and cook them.
This was embarrassing. Look, Jay said there's a guy at that feed store across from Duck Commander who will take blue-winged teal. So on the last day, the next to last day, we divided up. I don't know if y'all want to give your take on that. I wanted to bring my dog, and because he hadn't hunted.
Well, and we were taking Phyllis, and we filmed it for In the Woods. So, by the way, if you don't have In the Woods, you can see that. It's really interesting. So it was Phyllis's hunt with Dad. It was the first daddy-daughter hunt we've ever had, which was kind of strange and different.
Isn't that something, Phil? Phil, were you? How did you feel about
all
that?
I can say is, through the years, I have mellowed big time. When you see me,
good.
When
You're
you see me
good
with
dad.
you see me with a female, I don't care whether it's my mother, bless her soul, or my daughter,
or your
You
wife.
say, well, here comes old Rob. Here he goes going in that duck hunt this morning. I got a woman with me. They're like, whoa, that old guy getting old now.
Well, we've
These
never
gray whiskers, you learn when the whiskers start turning gray. There's a lot of things that you say, she's the daughter. She's never been duck hunting. She finds out I'm her dad.
Yeah. And
so
she loves the outdoors. And it was funny because when she was growing up,
I showed her what she was.
Yeah, you were like teaching her stuff.
I was giving her a little glimpse to prepare herself.
First thing she did was get a shell hung up at the gun, so we had to dig that out.
Well, think about it. The girl never has duck hunted, so when it came time to load your weapons, in other words, the reason I had her seated within arm's length of me is I was monitoring the way she was putting the shells. She went through the course. The wildlife people gave her a course.
like a 5-hour.
Well, you have to go through the
right because she just missed.
So she had the elementary things, but still, you take a woman with a loaded gun. She's never duck hunted. In other words, she's got 3 shells in the barrel of a shotgun. I tend to stay close to that and watch that very carefully.
Plus, we had the whole safety conversation about not shooting in front of people and stuff.
I didn't want her ringing old dad's ears, shooting over my head and all that stuff.
Let's face it, Dad, you're hearing so bad. At this point, I don't think it would make any difference.
But having thought about it, Phil, when you took me duck hunt, when you came to Jesus and got lined out, one of the best moves ever, because I discovered a God consciousness really when I went duck hunting the first time. It might have been weighing on me that things are different. My family's getting back together, but
it's a beautiful thing.
That was top 3 moments in my life. So who knows?
When you're sitting in a duck blind and you're right, daylight, whether you see any ducks or anything else, just being out there and being a part of it and experiencing it, and, drinking a hot cup of coffee in a beautiful surrounding. It's a spiritual.
That's a lot of people. They misunderstand that when someone says we're going to come along and take up your guns, well, the political part and the dastardly act that would be here we are, people who, I mean, our entire life we slept as children on pillows and mattresses. No deference to the guy, the pillow man. He's a good dude. But the bottom line is, the women picked the ducks, and they would take those feathers, and that's what we slept on. And there was no cleaning part going, and sending them through some kind of machine that cleans them all up. It was just duck feathers, and they sewed them together. The women did.
Yep.
Well, we slept on that. So I was smelling ducks from the time I was first bed I ever slept in. I slept on duck feathers. So one of the stories, a true story, I came in with some wood ducks one time, and I was in my prime. I was a lean machine then. So I had my wood ducks, and I come in there. I counted them, So I knew I had, I don't know what it was, 6, 7. So I looked around. I said, I thought I had 6 ducks. I said, maybe I left one in my truck, So I went out there and looked in my truck. No. So I came back in there, and Miss Kay said, well, Jace really loves ducks. He was holding that duck a while ago.
How old was it?
So, you were like 2 or 3.
I would say you were about,
I'd
say 2 or 3 years old. He was walking.
Yeah.
But she said, you might ought to go back there. He may have that duck, where he slept there. So I walked back there, and Jace was in bed asleep, and he had that wood duck like that, crouched like that, next to him like he was hugging a pillow, So I got a 3-year-old. I got a 3-year-old hugging a duck in the sleep. I looked down there. I said, "There's the duck hunter out of the bunch right there."
Well, that turned out to be true.
It sure did.
Jace has the most ability.
He loved them from the time he's 3 years old.
That wouldn't have worked though for much more than a day, Jace.
I just eased over there because I thought you give us a couple of days and this will be wrong. So I just eased down there and I eased that Woody out of his arms.
Two things probably happened there. I realized I had a love for duck hunting, and I battled duck lice my entire life.
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably had a transfer.
If you sleep with a duck as a pillow, you will have lice.
Duck lice, that's right.
All
ducks have lice that crawl around on them. You get used to them. You're picking one of them, and the lice is coming up your arm. They're pretty tough little things. Yeah. You got to
hard to kill.
Hard to kill.
They get on your body. So Jason, another thing.
They wouldn't hurt you if you ate them, probably, but
Well, yeah, who'd want to do that?
I never considered eating.
That's, I guess, ducks eat them. So another thing was, we probably, from that era of our lives, you probably didn't have a lot of stuffed animals around. We were a little bit Spartan on the toys back in that era.
You've seen a dog looking for a flea. He got his teeth. Yeah. And he's got his teeth going real quick.
Yeah.
He's trying to get that between his teeth.
Yeah.
Well, a duck, they'll light, and they'll turn around their neck, and they'll start going in their feathers like that. And you say, what's that duck's doing? He's like he's eating his feathers. I say, no, he's hunting them duck louse.
That's right.
You might have stumbled on a new product, Lice Krispies.
Hey.
I
don't think eating them will kill you because probably from time to time I might have.
So
by the time we get done cleaning them,
one of you entrepreneurs out there on Unashamed Nation, come up with that one, Lice Krispies. Let's see how.
Hey, it's organic.
You bet you.
To finish,
protein.
Yep. To finish the story, so we were separated, but I actually had a decent hunt. And y'all saw, because we had those 7-inch range.
We saw these survivors come by moving south.
Oh yeah, they were heading out. Jason right on to Mexico.
We couldn't hear him shooting because the wind was coming. He was a mile north of us, and we had a south wind.
Right.
And the south wind we couldn't hear him, so we didn't hear him shoot. Plus, he's shooting due north. He's in the blind that was facing north.
Yeah.
So he was boom, boom, boom. The gun was pointed away from us a mile away. Well, we didn't hear him shoot. But then Stone with this high-tech walkie-talkie.
Kudos to the black box. The black box. It was giving us a play-by-play.
And Jace was giving a play-by-play. Well, we looked across the tree line, and coming from the direction of where Jace says, I'm putting a whipping on them up here, they just flew by. Of course, we tried to call at them, but they just went on by, heading on south. Old Jace ran that bunch out.
Well, every once in a while, a bunch like that will come
survivors.
That's right.
Yes.
There was a big rain.
So Jace, how did you get them? You said you pulled a trick.
Well, because we didn't know how much water we had, because we got a 6 or 7.
Give our audience a taste of what it's like when ducks light 150 yards away from you. Yeah. How do you get them to you? Because most people don't realize you do it with a shotgun. They're thinking, well, how would that work? Tell them how it works.
All right. Well, it was about a 6 or 7 inch rain. So
which
was
water, another tropical storm. We have just been blasted this year.
So me and the dog, we pulled out because there's a place that one of our best holes, and I looked and I was like, boy, there's a lot of water here. And so I'm in Margo. I haven't ridden it through the water since last year. The first thing that happened when I got on the mound to where it was, which I noticed a lot of water in the area. I was like, where's all this water coming from? Duh. Well, there's a hole. I don't know, rats, dry rot.
You may have to explain an Argo.
Well, it's an amphibious.
It goes through water like they hit the beaches, and that's where it come from.
Yeah.
They hit the beaches at Omaha.
Yeah. Well, when I hit the water, it filled up. And so luckily,
it wasn't a good boat.
Yeah, it was going to sink. But I got on the mound, and so me and the dog get in there. Well, all the ducks came in the first 5 minutes. They poured in, but they all lit behind me, which told me
more water back there.
Yeah, they have been coming in there. We call those local ducks. Now they're not local. They've been there,
but they've been there a few days.
Yeah, a few days. Yeah. Well, I saw a bunch of teal come by. Of course, I'm like, getting ready. My dogs, I call. I never saw them again. And so about 10 minutes into the hunt, I heard them, which is the teal sound. Yep. And so, do I have my duck call? Have we ever blown the teal call?
I don't know. Hit it a lick where the people will know, Jase.
No, I have my calls, but not my teal call. But it's a little miniature
high-pitched
amount. It's like they're kind of laughing, like yeah. So I kept hearing it. Well, I would call, they would call. A lot of times they'll get up.
It'll make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. I'll tell you that.
Well, that went on for 40 minutes probably, and then I sent a text.
You're just calling back and forth.
And I said, I'm fixed to see if my gun will fire, which means I'm going to make a noise because I want to see what's here. And so I tested my gun. Well, when I did, ducks got up all over the place. And, I just saw a teal come by because my goal was to shoot one teal.
They had all lit where they lit, but they didn't know you were on the premises.
They didn't know I was there, but when the shot went off, they all got up. Well, I was just trying to shoot one teal for my dog. Yeah. So, boom, and he folded. And my dog looked at me, which was strange because usually he just takes off, and I'm like, bah! Yeah, it has begun. So he took off. Well, he's halfway out there. I look up, and another one, just because they were just kind of flying, boom. Well, he folds. Well, now my dog's confused. Do you want me to go get that one or this one? So I'm motioning to the dog. Well, as I'm getting shells in my gun, because I'm fumbling around looking for shells, I look up, there's two more sitting in the decoys in literally 3 or 4 seconds.
They just came.
So I wasn't sure how many shells I had, if I had put one in or two, but I'm like, I'm going to shoot these two. Well, when I shot, 2 more got up, so there was 3. So I killed that one. Well, then I killed the next one, and I put it on the next one, and no shell. So I put 3 shells in my gun. Well, he just turns around and comes back over because early in the year they hadn't been shot, and I missed him. Yeah. So that was my miss. So anyway, it was that was it. It lasted like 2 minutes, and I sent Phil them a text. I said, they're coming. They're on their way. I sent Jay because I didn't know what was behind me, but I had seen that big bunch early.
Right.
So my dog actually did good. Well, to finish my story before, so I was actually talking to Phil on the phone. Of course, he was on his landline after the hunt, and I was going to give these ducks away because Jay's like, I got a guy who loves them. I was like, oh, that's gold.
Because we have a few that do it. Hang on. Let's take a break before we finish that. So one of my favorite sponsors on our podcast is Omega XL. And I've had a couple of conversations about pain with Dr. McQuillan because there's been a lot of research that they've done about this product. So Dad and I are taking the product, and I always get a little bit nervous when my bottle starts getting low if my next one's going to come in. That's how much it's helped me to not have to take any ibuprofen or anything like that. I mean, it's amazing. It basically attacks inflammation, which is, of course, where most of your pain comes from. And it's natural. It comes from mussels that are grown in New Zealand.
The pristine waters of New Zealand.
You always say that.
I know, and I love the way he says that. So basically, if you're having issues, I know a lot of people are using it because you've been sending me emails, and I know a lot of people are being helped. Phyllis just started taking it, my sister. because she's got some issues with her shoulder. So be interested to hear how it helps her as well. So if you're suffering aches and pains, stiffness, you need to try Omega XL. You can order it. You get a second bottle free, so that's great just because you're a listener to our podcast. So you go omegaxl.com/Phil, omegaxl.com/Phil, or you can call them 800-844-4888. That's 800-844-4888.
The only pill I take.
So I pull in there, but I was telling Phil about the hunt as I was giving the ducks away, and I just stuck my head back here at the back end of this feed store, and I was like, I heard somebody loves blue-winged teal, and the guy said, that'd be me. And I thought he looked a little familiar, but I wasn't sure. But anyway, I got him the ducks, and he's like, you don't remember me? And I was, which we went over in an earlier podcast. That's so difficult a question. And I was like, you look familiar because you did. And he was like, you baptized me. I was like, really? That seems like something you'd remember. Right. But he was like, oh, it's 20 years ago. But actually, it worked out. I mean, a duck hunt kind of brought us back together. And, of course, I was like, well, how you doing? And he was like, pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
So it was pretty
and
good.
he took the teal, which was good.
And he said, I said, well, they're a little musty for me. And he's like, oh, I like any duck. He said, I like the mustiness.
Yeah. Which.
There you go.
To each his own.
Which that's why we still hunt them and enjoy them. Yeah, it was a good day. I mean, it's the only day I went this year, and mainly I was just there to kind of help facilitate Dad and Phyllis for the show. But we enjoyed it. It was good. It was it was a fun thing for her to be a part of for me.
Yeah. Well, we went the next day back together, and she went, so I got to hunt with her. That was the last. I guess that was yesterday.
Yeah, it was yesterday.
And we actually saw some, but they wouldn't come in.
Right. Yeah, she loves it. She's
been a couple of times, but it was such a slow year on the teal. But of course, you got to remember there were ducks lighting in the decoys, wood ducks.
Yeah.
And she said, "How in the world do y'all tell the difference at this time of day? You barely can. It's almost dark.
Yeah.
But you know what kind they are when they light." I said, "It's
years of experience."
Yep.
She was marveling at. We saw those steel flowers. She was like, "How would you know that's what they were?" I said, "Well, ducks all fly differently. They have a different wing beat pattern, so we all know it from that."
Yeah, there's stuff you don't really realize. Because she said, "How do you know that's not a teal?" Because Phil, Si said, he's got a blue patch on it. I was like, no. But I was like, the movement of his head.
Yeah.
And she was like, what? I was like, look at how he's moving his head.
Right.
I said, a teal doesn't move his head that way.
That's correct.
A wood duck does this little.
That's right.
I said, I know it's not a teal. But she was like, well, how would you learn that? And I thought, that's a good question.
Observation.
I guess I didn't notice that I knew that.
It's kind of a little funky 70s. Remember the old dance they had?
So you can't shoot wood ducks during teal season. But we had enough wood ducks, light in the decoys. We'd have had a pretty good shoot. But since you couldn't shoot them, the states over there in the Carolinas, you can. They give you a woody or two that you can kill during teal season.
Really?
I like that law better.
They call them mistake ducks because they can't tell the difference.
I have to say, statute of limitations is, I hope, run up. But when I was young, I didn't know, I wasn't able to distinguish. So I'd had a few misidentifications.
Well, you have to learn. Now, I'm sure if you get checked by the
shoot
game
the wrong
warden,
duck, cost you $150 fine. 5 years unsupervised probation. I mean, look, it's a federal offense.
It's literally
to
a federal
shoot the wrong duck. I mean, these people, y'all talk about rules out there in America. Look, go duck hunting one time. I mean, listen, they got more rules than you kill 2 of this kind, 1 of that kind, 3 of those kind. You can't have over 6 total. Well, when everybody gets to looking at what they have, say, okay, let's see. I can't kill but 3 woodies. You better not have 4 on you. Just have the 3, or it's a fine and all that. So it's stringently too many rules, but I mean, they mean well.
Well, some of them we've talked about before are kind of silly in that
some of them are redundant too.
Well, you can hunt 60 days.
Think about it, 250 years, and the continent went from a wilderness to skyscrapers, concrete, big old wind turbines going to, which is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. By the way, those things kill way more birds than we do.
Oh, exactly.
Just the spinning. So when you look at them on the landscape, you're like, we don't want to fill we've got enough stuff already built on it, draining rivers, dammed up this and that and the other. Mm-hmm. Well, you look at but the ducks, amazingly, they raise, and most of them in the Canadian wilderness, there's still enough territory where it's still churning out literally hundreds of millions of birds. And you add them all up, cranes, various, snipe, all kinds of migrators. We're watching them all the time. Look at that, they got some snipe. They just getting here. Well, we're watching them all. Kingfishers, they all migrate. Hummingbirds, we're seeing all these birds that are migrating. Then you have the geese, just big, mighty throngs of them in the air. They knock down jet aircraft, or they suck them up in the engine. The old guy that landed on the Potomac up there. Yeah, the Hudson.
Sullenberger.
Yeah. What river was it?
It was the Hudson River.
Hudson River. He had to set the plane down in the Hudson River. 2 Canadian geese went through his engines. I'm going in on the Hudson. They said, come back.
But he was a glider.
Didn't
pilot.
lose a man.
He was a glider pilot, which was a break for them. I think about it every time.
I'm just saying, though, birds migrating birds are pretty well. There's times when they will actually shut down airports because they look at them coming by, at 3,000 to 5,000 feet, and they're like, "Whoa, we need to. That's too many birds to fly through."
That's right. Remember, Jace, we were going.
It's amazing they're that resilient.
We were going to our uncle's funeral in Tyler. It was me, you, and Willie, I think, and Mom, and in a prop plane, the small one, and we were coming in. All of a sudden, we were probably 500 feet from the runway, and all of a sudden, we just did a straight up thing, and of course, it all shook us. We looked at each other, and the pilot came on. There was that old Alan. He came on there and said, "Sorry about that. A buzzard just I didn't want to. You don't want to hit one of them." A buzzard was coming in there, and he's coming in on landing like this, and all of a sudden he just goes straight up, which is very unusual. And then he laid it back down, and we landed.
A buzzard in a prop is a bad.
Well, I said, have you ever hit one? He said,
good size
he
bird.
said, oh yeah. And I said, well, did it cause you? He said, oh no. We just chewed him up. He said, but you talk about stink. So he was more avoiding it because he didn't want his plane to stink. But of course, all our hearts, went in their chest. When you have one of them.
That smell was coming from that dead armadillo on the road.
That's right.
The thing ate.
You are what you eat.
The one that landed in the Hudson, they hit a Canadian hunker.
Yeah,
that's which a Canadian hunker's.
But
that's
a big
that bird, if you go through, it sucks it up.
10, 12 pounds, 15 pounds.
In an engine. The engines are more susceptible than a prop.
So we're here trying to clean up the sky, but, so that's what we do. We're out there just putting our 2 cents worth in, but it is pretty remarkable. It's a 250-year-old tradition,
right?
Hunting birds.
Yep.
So that's still here. But, these people, they pick up the guns. We're looking at them like, are you crazy?
Yeah, well, why would
your whole lifestyle is gone.
Right.
Yeah. So we need to hold on to that.
So
that's why the Second Amendment is critical.
That's right.
A lot of people say, well, I'm not shooting these kind of guns. And we need our weapons. We're duck hunters.
And we cycle through it every election cycle. So this year on the duck stamp, there was a whistling duck. Which I think, did y'all see one this year that came in?
Yeah, there's some.
I saw a bunch.
They're raising where we are.
Yeah, so right, there's a lake in town right by the church, right by our church building, and the woman that lives next to that pond, because I saw about 30 of them in there, and I was like, those look like ducks, but I said, what are they? And then I got to looking at them. I looked
tree ducks.
Yeah, they were, and so then she said every year they migrate in. I think
they've just come up from South America
or wherever they came from, right?
Yeah, when the climate
Mexico.
started getting a little warmer, and it is, these ducks just started migrating up from South America.
They're coming up,
and they're on the coast of Louisiana, is where they were for years now. But now they've migrated on up to North Louisiana. Somebody told me they're good to eat, so I never have tried one of them.
Are they? Can you hunt them? Are they?
Yeah, I think during duck season you can shoot one.
Okay,
but I'm not 100% sure.
We'll
I will be 100% sure if I discharge my weapon. But there was a bunch of them on my hunt. I could hear them. Once I got the sound, which our pintail widgeon,
they sort of whistle, don't they?
Oh, it's a louder whistle, but you can get the sound from your pintail widgeon whistle.
Yeah.
So you need to change. I need to tell them in Duck Commander, because they got a 6-in-1. They call it a 6-in-1.
Yep.
We need to put 7.
We've added.
He sounds. Now I got to figure out exactly how to emulate, the style.
Do you know if it's the hen or the drake that makes a sound?
No, I just heard that one that came in. I'll do some research.
Yeah.
But if they're good to eat, and we now have them. I'd never seen one hunting in my life.
Well,
this year,
Jay said if you can kill one, he wants to mount one just because it's unique and different.
Well, they got big old legs on them. I was thinking, turkey legs.
I think there's a couple of different kinds. One of them they call a fulvous tree duck.
I think that's what we have.
He has long legs,
Yeah.
like a crane.
Right.
And but he's an ugly joker. But they claim they're pretty good to eat. I saw one that had about 5 little ones about a couple of months ago. I said, well, good night. I didn't know them tree ducks were raised on us.
On our place?
Yeah. They had raised off. She'd raised off a brood because she'd come off the bank. There was a couple more sitting there.
Yeah.
But then she had about 5 little ones following her,
Right.
We have alligators and stuff. So, for a duck to make it,
That's incredible.
I mean, between the hoot owls and the alligators and the otters and the mink and
survive.
the fox and bobcats, everything's after them. I mean, so out of a brood, like wood ducks, she'll lay 12 eggs in a hollow tree, but about 4 will make it from all the varmints eating on them. But the reason the Almighty made them, food source for man and beast.
Right.
So
let's take another break. One of the things that has unfortunately afflicted our nation is people that get in severe debt. A lot of it starts with people going to college. They get these student loans. It's high interest. They get out. They got to pay all this money back, and it just it's a spiral. It's a bad situation, and it really hurts, obviously, people and hurts our economy. One of the things that you can do to help your credit score go up is go to a group called ScoreMaster. And this is so, if you have to have a loan or whatever for your house, maybe you've had some debt issues, and hopefully you're working on that because we want to try to get you out of debt. But these people can help with raising your credit score. Basically, 97 points, some of them had as high as 61 points in 20 days. So
they basically want to look at your score and not say, heck no.
That's what we don't want. That's exactly right. So a ScoreMaster puts you in control of your own finances, not the banks. You can enroll in minutes. ScoreMaster.com/Phil. That's ScoreMaster.com/Phil, and get your credit score up if you need it. Speaking of alligators, Tony told me, so, I've been down here 45, or we've been here 45 years, hadn't lived here for 25. But I've never seen an alligator in Thompson Bow, which is right behind our house.
Yeah, we've seen quite a few of them.
I know, and that's what he said. I didn't
you need to get out more.
Well, I don't come here.
Yeah,
I come down to do
I
podcasts.
don't know if they're migrating.
I was shocked
through here, or
I've
it's
seen
more and
this
more,
year.
more and more
I know.
every year.
They've always been here, but North Louisiana not as much as South Louisiana. But these days, we see them everywhere, all over every duck hole we've got. We see alligators.
Oh, I've seen them on the property.
We've got a problem. I think those back-to-back flood years dispersed the gators because it's rapid now. Now we're seeing them. I mean, he saw it, which they're kind of like, oh, no, alligators. And I'm like, look.
Yeah,
I was with the swamp people the other night. I was like, boy, y'all make that really dramatic. He was like, yeah.
They did for gators what Jaws did for sharks. Like it makes it. Most of the time, people are swimming around, sharks are swimming around. There's no interaction. It's the same with a gator. But you say alligator to people that aren't used to being around them at all, and they're just mortified. Like he's just going to jump in the boat and eat you.
I saw a big splash when the water was like 15 feet deep over there. I had a duck blind over there, and I'm pulling up to it. And we're making sure we got all our ropes tied up. The river's coming up, so it's up 20 feet from dry ground. It's just way up there. So I got about 15 of them big floaters, so I'm out there checking them. I saw a big splash, and I said, that might have been a beaver. I said, I think I'll put a bullet in his head because, they try to build their houses on the duck blinds, and they don't check with me about it. I said, well, so I pull up there. I saw the splash. I just saw a big splash. So I pull up there, and I start following the bubbles from whatever it was. So I'm just on that line of bubbles. I'm right in behind it in my motor, got my gun in my hand, and I see the bubbles. I see them. They're coming on up. And I said, yeah, I'm going to shoot this old beaver. I got my gun ready. When the thing popped up, it was an alligator head. The alligator popped his head up, looked around. I'm like, I said, well, I thought you were a beaver. You live.
Because we're hoping they'll eat beavers.
It was out of alligator season or whatever you call it.
Yeah. And you're hoping they'll eat beavers, which would take care of your problem.
They eat beavers.
Yeah. So it's just good.
He's my friend. See,
Right.
anything that eats beavers, he's my friend.
Well,
and they're really not aggressive.
They're not
The
aggressive.
only time they're aggressive is
On
when
a nest.
when they're on a nest, and you don't want to be stomping around.
They
on
will
a nest.
get a dog or two down in South Louisiana. They get a few of the dogs
Up
early
here
in the-
too.
Yeah.
There was a guy that was training his lab in Black Bayou or somewhere up north, and they got him. It was a little old small, about your color. It was like a.
Oh, them two little dogs I got, they wouldn't last 5 minutes in some of these places around there. I mean, that's just like perfect appetizer for an alligator.
Well, and Phyllis and Tony do have a little old hound, and he was down there by the thing. I said, well, if he gets the water around him, you don't want to do that. Cause,
Well, they're faster than a human on dry land.
Oh,
So you
yeah.
think you're going to run? No.
No.
He'll chase you down and eat you.
Yeah, if he
wanted
was
to.
aggressive, we'd be in
He's
trouble.
not aggressive.
No.
So Al, what about this person who got a hold of us and said,
So we got some listener questions that I always like doing these because we get a lot of interesting stuff from you guys, and it gives us a chance to kind of get out of our normal study. And one of the questions we got, and I don't have a name for this one, but they said, was the snake an actual snake in the Garden of Eden? And of course, we don't ever talk about this amongst ourselves before we get here, and we were already debating before we got on the thing. So I'll let Dad, you start. You tell us what you think about it.
I would just simply say, what's the story of the donkey the talking donkey?
Yeah.
Balaam's donkey.
Balaam's donkey.
In the
There
King
was a
James,
donkey.
it's Balaam's ass.
There was a
That's what it
donkey
said.
that God spoke through. So when you get into the spiritual world, although sometimes you're looking at it and you're saying, boy, some of this stuff, but I would just simply point out, we just covered in John 13, as soon that Jesus said, it is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish is the one that's going to betray me. So there's the disciple sitting there, and we have the way he's going to be exposed. So then, dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas Iscariot, son of Simon. As soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered him. So I know he can enter human beings. Well, if he can enter human beings, then you would think, based on the donkey story, a talking donkey, you're like, So you say he could enter animals too.
So do you believe it was a snake?
I believe it's possible that because of the donkey story and the one where he entered Judas, Satan entered him. So in a spiritual world, it's not like the scientific world, where this is impossible.
Right.
Well, we just have these stories, and you say, is there an answer for them? What's amazing is that snake or not, I can see that Satan would have entered a big snake and could do anything. He's that powerful.
I think
I know the ramifications of what happened
right
with that story. I know that came out of it. You have good God and evil Satan. Now, how he got here through a snake, probably it was because of people who are atheists said, well, that'd be impossible. You know, Job spending the night in the belly of a whale.
Yeah.
They usually pick those atheists and say, well, that's impossible. In the spiritual world, anything is possible.
Well, that's right. I mean,
that's my answer to that.
Supernatural. I think it was a snake as well, and although I could be wrong, but it could have been something else. But part of it is because it's so descriptive because it says the serpent was more crafty. This is Genesis 3 than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. So I mean, he puts it in the animal world context.
If that snake, Jase, Al, if that snake. And if Satan can enter them, if that's the way it's going to work, on my part, if you could see the trail of dead snakes that I have killed, I have been a great harvester against Satan, and I have killed many of my foes. Because there's a pile of cottonmouths I've left behind me that will reach this ceiling right
Phil,
there.
if you'd have been in the garden,
we could have avoided this whole thing.
This would have never happened. This whole thing about sin, if I'd been there with a weapon, you say the snake would have never made it that far.
You had to get a stick.
I'd have taken him out.
So whenever, which is funny, because of course, obviously we're saying this tongue in cheek, because at this point in time, before the flood, Adam and Eve, and I guess all of humanity, just had a very common relationship with the animal world. I mean, they didn't have the wildness about them until post-flood.
They were all vegetarians.
That's right. And
we know that from Genesis 9.
From Genesis 9. So, but the reason I think it is, and then I'll let Jace has another theory, I think. It says when he cursed them. So after obviously the snake could talk. That's not normal. But I agree with you. I think that's because Satan entered the snake and allowed him to talk. And just think about what that would have sounded like.
The bottom line is I see good on the earth, and the good comes from God. And I see evil. I see them both. Right. For someone to deny, even an atheist knows when he breaks the law. He knows when he sins. His conscience tells him that.
Right.
Well, I know I'm saying I don't believe in God, but what I'm doing right here, this is not right. So I need to really cover my tracks here. And they scheme and all this stuff that comes out of it. Right. So there is evil on the earth. There is good. And the story on where he came from through a snake is a pretty heavy one to believe. But I'm looking at the rest of the Bible. And the good and evil part.
There's supernatural stuff everywhere. So to say, well, now that could never happen, well, you could say that about every story in the Bible. There were three things that happened. First, the snake was cursed, and here's what God told the snake. Now, you think about, well, that's not fair to the snake because it was Satan that was, if that's the case. But here's what he said about the snake. Because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock and all wild animals, which, by the way, I believe is why there's a trail of dead snakes. Or if one comes out on the road, people will run off the road.
Plus, another good point is you have among the animal world, when you get to snakes, you have the vast majority, which is a good thing, of snakes are good snakes.
Yeah, we only kill poison snakes.
They're not going to hurt you.
Right.
But there is a percentage of them in there, speaking of good and evil, there is a percentage of snakes that you don't want to fool with. They are sneaky, and they will bite you without any kind of warning. I mean, some even have a warning device. The rattlesnake, you hear that buzz, you better stand close. You better watch what you got going there. But I'm just saying, among snakes, there's good and evil.
All right, let's take another break. So here's another. So anyway, he says, you will crawl on your belly and you will eat dust all the days of your life, which implies to me that this early version of the snake had legs. He's walking.
And most people are afraid of any snake.
Right.
Why are they so afraid of any snake?
Well, that's right. Something's
because they do a lot of damage against just regular poor old snakes.
So let me give the rest of my theory.
Phil, it's just like people who can't identify ducks. I mean, like if Missy sees a snake, she has no idea. You would immediately know that's a rattlesnake. She wouldn't know.
Right.
She wouldn't know.
So she's just frightened.
Well, I'm just snake. Feels like, well, how come? Yeah. I really think that's it. They're not. They don't identify a snake. They just see snake. I mean, size is the same way.
So let me read you this. So this is my theory on why I think that was an actual snake inhabited by evil spirit. Pythons and this is from the American Museum of Natural History. Pythons and boa constrictors, so the big boys, they have tiny hind leg bones buried in muscles towards their tail, the end of their tail. Little bitty flanges that at one point were legs. Wow. So such features, either useless or poorly suited to performing scientific specific tasks, are described as vestigial. So it's vestigial leg bones. They are also intriguing. Then they say they are also intriguing evidence of the evolutionary history of the species. So they're saying by evolution they lost their legs.
But evolution, we've had this argument before. I don't want to have it again. I mean, I'm like, things evolve. That I think God set that in motion.
Sure he did.
That doesn't bother me. But it's like our people we don't want to admit anything.
Right.
I mean, things evolve.
So my theory
couldn't God have set it up where?
My theory is, what if the big boys are up walking around in this period, but then when the curse happens, there's no more walking around. From now on, you're going to slide around.
I love that.
I mean, that God would have done that.
It's possible.
I like that. The parts that's what I look for since I'm an outdoors person. I look for evidence where you read a verse, and he says, "Well, now you're going to slither around I didn't know that.
That was interesting.
I think it's
point,
an awesome piece of evidence.
Another point is at least interesting that when the Apostle Paul got to in the book of Ephesians 6:10 and following, he said, "Arm yourselves, put on the full armor of God, because we don't wrestle. We're not wrestling against flesh and blood." Now, when you start looking at it, you say that's not where the enemy is.
Right.
The enemy is far more powerful. In other words, we're going against the authorities, the rulers, the powers of this dark world, and the spiritual forces of evil. Listen to this, in the heavenly realms. So even all those thousands of years later, and by my count, about 5,000 years later, after the snake in the Garden of Eden, if we're not wrestling against flesh and blood, that tells me there is a spiritual world out there with a lot of crazy going on within it. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I'll recommend a book for our audience. It's the best book I've ever read on spiritual warfare. A guy named Joe Beam wrote it, and it's called Seeing the Unseen. Seeing the Unseen by Joe Beam.
Agree.
It is outstanding because he goes into all those patches like you just mentioned. There's a lot in the whole Bible that talk about evil spirits, that there's sort of a ranking system of Satan and evil and, different, and he talks about the stuff we read about.
And snake or not, to this day, I just got a letter the other day, or somebody showed it to me, where people, they joined the Satanist club, this is various degrees, but there's all kind of groups together, and they have Satan that they bow down to.
He sent
to this day.
You a letter?
Huh? Somebody sent it off on a computer. I don't have a computer, but they brought me some information about the Satanists, and the girl said, basically, I've become a Satanist. She said, because I'm so afraid my daughters won't be able to to abort their children. She had 2 daughters that she had, and her logic was, I'm so afraid that they won't have the freedom to kill their children because of the current situation with the Supreme Court and everything. They're going to take that right away from me. So I became a Satanist. She said, amazingly, I found out that I've been a Satanist a long time, but I just didn't realize it till now, because it doesn't seem normal to me, but now it's abnormal times, so I've become a Satanist, of which I really was one to begin with. So I have to kill my children, or this whole thing is going to blow up. I have to have that right to do it.
But think about the irony that
was the logic.
She had 2 daughters that she didn't terminate, and she wants them to have the right to terminate other children.
She said,
her grandchildren.
I've never had an abortion. I have 2 children, my 2 girls.
That's fascinating.
But I'm worried. But I just thought to myself, I said, what in the world kind of logic is that? Give your daughters that you let live, give them the ability to kill their offspring for no reason, and then become a Satanist, and then say, whoa, I guess I've been a Satanist for a while. Now we don't worship Satan. We don't bow down to him. We just think he's right when it comes to us having the right to kill our children.
We talk about single issue voters.
I read it and just sort of shook my head, and of course in the trash can it went. But I mean, I'm thinking, girl, I said, why would you come up with that scheme in order to just kill an unborn child?
Validates more of what the Bible says.
And again,
she's actually validating herself.
Let's take one last break. I thought of the verse that says he blinds the minds of unbelievers, or the idea that they get darkened in their understanding. I mean, to follow her logic path to where that wound up, that's a pretty that's a dark.
Listen to what Isaiah said. Whom are you mocking? At whom do you sneer and stick out your tongue? These are the people that are mocking God. They sneer. They read about, Satan being in snakes. Then they're like, what in the world? Are you not a brood of rebels, the offspring of liars? You burn with lust among the oaks and under every spreading tree. You're just immoral and perverted to the core of your being. You sacrifice your children in the ravines. They would walk up to those cliffs and just chunk them. Their child just bounce off the rocks down there.
Yep.
That's what they were doing in the days of Isaiah. Well, when you look at it, you read this, and you sacrifice your children in the ravines. You go to a little secluded spot and just throw them away. That's what they were doing in the day of Isaiah, and he was saying, you are a brood of liars.
Yeah, there's
offspring of liars.
There was another group. I can't remember which prophet it's in. Maybe Isaiah, and they talk about the fires of Molech. So they would build these iron altars and get a red hot fire, and then just throw their children in the fire.
Yep.
They were sacrificing them to Molech.
They've been killing their children ever since they were on planet Earth. Now, when you say, well, Satan who threw a snake, and he introduced evil to the world and the downfall of mankind, and the sin spread from there all the way to right now where I'm seated, you're like, when you look at it that way, you're like, so you believe there's good and evil on the earth? Well, where's it coming from? What's the source of both of them? What's the source of good? Is there a source for good? Is this Jesus real? And what's the source of evil? No matter how it got here, it's a wild story, but I'm looking at it. I know one thing, good and evil, it's here.
That's right.
And I've tasted both of them.
Isn't it interesting, though, going back over thousands of years of human history, that killing of the innocent has always been a thing.
It's always been a thing.
I mean, and you think it's the worst thing. Like, it's the worst possible thing I could imagine.
The thing is
people to
kicking,
come up with.
the baby is kicking inside the womb, and you know how it got there, sex, you said that's how it gets there, and it's the way things work. Everybody knows it. That's how you get them. And he's moving around, and you're like, but it's really not a person. And you're like,
yeah.
Well, you were there
goes
once.
Off the rails.
You were right there at one time.
Yeah.
Was it you? And they're like, well, it was me then, but I wasn't a person yet. You say, well, you're standing here. You were inside a womb, and you came out of the womb a person, and it's you, and there's no one like you on planet Earth. You were in the womb at one point, and you're telling me now there's not anybody in there.
Right.
I'm like, well, you just came out of there.
Or this crazy woman, whose mother had her, and then she had 2 daughters, and now she's saying, but I want them to kill my grandchildren.
Yeah.
How does that make any sense?
That's when it comes to evil, and we saw how it was introduced through a snake. You're like, maybe it's just God saying, this is like a deadly poison viper.
Yeah. Well, Margaret Sanger, the woman.
For some reason or another, all human beings, especially females, are deathly afraid of any kind of snake if they find them like we found one in here.
And it was a rat
snake. I looked at him.
It was a rat snake.
They said, what do you think? And I said, non-poisonous, let him go. He's catching that's a rat snake.
That's right.
He catches
You saw
mice.
what he was after, Jace, when
I
you
saw
came
a
in.
mouse coming in, so he needs to do his job.
So I wanted to...
So wrap it up.
We just got a couple of minutes left.
It's possible that Satan can enter anything.
Yeah.
He entered Judas. He entered the donkey. He entered the snake.
So whether
What's your take, Jace?
Well, I don't know. It doesn't,
and it doesn't matter, but it's interesting.
It doesn't.
Discussion.
It doesn't.
Well, we've crossed a threshold here. Some of our fan base said we want more of old Phil than less of Jace. Jace has finally admitted, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know.
That's why I hadn't meant to say anything. I don't know. I'm 50-50 on this one.
I definitely moved the needle on you when you learned that about the legs and the pythons, right? I mean, the leg bones.
Well, I liked it, but I've always viewed Genesis kind of like I do Revelation. I mean, he wasn't giving you, the purpose was not to give you every detail of how this all happened, because a lot of impossible things are happening. So I don't think that's the intent, because we have so many questions that will never be answered. So I just think it's an overall view of how we got here. Get the point. God made it.
A metaphor.
Yeah, there's a line of thinking in Christian universities now that the first 11 chapters of Genesis are not literal people or things, which I don't agree with that. Because I try to take it literal if it is. Now, but to your point,
I'm saying
there are some things
I'm kind of in between. I feel like Adam and Eve, were real, but where were the other people, and were there? Because all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute, they're reproducing even after the flood.
I've got a theory on that too, but I don't have enough time to talk about it.
Well, what I'm saying now, there's a lot of theories that come
Correct.
from that, and it doesn't matter to me if the snake was actually talking or it was the only way they could describe how Satan had entered this situation. To me, it doesn't matter. I mean, the point is, evil's real. God's team wins. God, because of the occurrences in the garden, had to put forth in motion his scheme of redemption, which ultimately brought us.
So hang on, Dad. So let's. We're out of time for Unashamed, but I got to make my point now, and I want to hear what Dad has to say. So for those of you in the woods that have that, you can continue to hear this little bit of bonus. Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes, and don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube. And be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.